Okay, we are live again. Welcome, Tim.
Welcome.
A very good morning. And Sumit, if you can hear me, welcome in our live chat session with Dr. Tim. This is our fourth edition. Sorry, it's a third edition. Uh, and we have done live earlier, me and Tim, and we have discussed the details about project management. And in our last show, we had some request wherein people wanted to discuss on a live case study related to project management. So we thought, why not pull in some real-time, real-life project managers and hear out what they actually come across as a challenge when they have to manage, plan, and execute large sizes of project, and henceforth. So I'm having Sumit with me. In a minute, we'll have another project manager. His name is Manish Shah, who will be joining in any moment. So Tim, uh, like always, I introduce you a little bit, and then you have to introduce yourself a little bit more about yourself. But people who are joining in for the first time here, Tim Jerome, he's based out in Albuquerque. It's in New Mexico. And Sumit Roy is joining us from Bangalore. He works for National Instrument. Welcome, everybody on the show. So the format is going to be pretty simple, and we'll have it more. So I will not ask this time the way I've been doing in the past time. I will pass on my bat to Sumit Roy and Manish Shah to question you and ask certain live issues that they come across when they actually manage, plan, and execute projects. So, Sumit, if you could please help us know a little bit about yourself, about your role, and if you have any queries, you can ask Tim. Tim is with you, and now we can start there.
So yeah, Tim, as I told, I've been working in NI for like a long time now, and I slowly took on responsibilities, few responsibilities to look at projects and manage it. And definitely, I feel it's a new role. I would love to like hear from you how to do that. So the set of questions that I had created will be a good point to begin with. Like,
Tim and Sumit, I also have Manish with me. He has just joined in. Welcome, Manish. So Manish is working for Ijona Services, and he is a senior project manager there. Manish, can you hear me? No, we can't hear you. So,
Sorry, I was
okay,
on
we
mute.
check on that. All right, no problem. Wonderful. Welcome. So, Manish, with us, we have Tim and Sumit. Sumit is a project manager with National Instrument. So, basically, the way we discussed earlier, that this session would be uh, purely to talk on the real life situation and challenges that a project manager encounters while managing a project. So I would start with Sumit. Sumit, if you can ask certain queries to Tim and take the discussion forward.
so first question would be like, how do we identify challenges? How do we identify like challenges when we are managing a project, really challenging project? So what
Uh,
is
so so think about this, okay? You're being asked to clean out a dry riverbed, right? And it's full of sticks and sand and rocks. Well, being a smart person, you can take a horse and take the biggest branch and tie that branch to the horse and pull all the sticks away. And then you have sand and rocks. And then what you do is you take water and you blow the sand away. That's the easy stuff, and it's fun. And then all of a sudden, you're exposed with a bunch of boulders. This is not just projects and project management. This is the way work works. The hard things are what are exposed after the fun, easy work is done. And the problem is that we have a tendency to ignore the biggest boulders. It's difficult. But we have like 3 millennia of thought leaders and philosophers and educators who say, you know what? If you look at the biggest, most horrible boulder you have and push there, you're going to make the greatest impact. It's called prioritization. And you push and you push and you push. And then sometimes you move the boulder and sometimes you don't, but your muscles grow. Now, you have to get the rest of the work done, but you continue to push that boulder and you talk to the people around you. And you constantly talk to the people around you about that boulder and how important that boulder is. And that's the focus until everybody gets tired of even listening to you talk to the boulder. And they'll get so tired that they decide to help you move it. This is what a project manager does. They help focus and they gain the interest and attention of the team. And they use that. And every meeting, here's our top 5 things. Here's our top 5 big boulders that we're going to address. Boom, 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 boom. Here comes Tim. He's talking about the big boulders again. Good. This is the type of thing that we need to think about. And that's what a project manager is. They're a focus. They refine.
So, the way we do some of these is like we add like whenever we start working on it, we have a very detailed research items scheduled so that we can work on those research, which is basically to uncover all the hidden boulders, big boulders, and then we also go ahead and then refine it by even coming up with an item like prototyping work or something even before we jump to the actual work is just like 20% to 30%. That's the like estimated time frame that a project manager looks at. So apart from like research and a prototype, can you suggest few of like things that you have seen in your actual work?
Yeah, prototyping is great. I expect that you're talking about Agile. And Agile does some really smart things. Number one, it breaks the work up into small chunks. And chunking the work like that actually helps you too, because you can create small, quick teams and small, quick focus actions that actually explore these boulders and expose them quicker. And if you do it that way as a leader and a project manager, all of a sudden your job is communication. Because you have a bunch of sprints going on, you get to actually be the facilitator. You're the scrum master, moving the information around. So everybody actually gets the breakout knowledge and the learning experience quickly. And then there's 2 other things that you're watching too. And traditionally you'll see this in formal project management training. There's historical knowledge. Basically knowledge bases and how-tos that you can actually help people be exposed to. Process and procedure, as well as other people who've done the work, and that's part of it. But then you hear things out of the side of your ear. It has to be this way. When you hear an executive say it has to be this way, you ask why. And again, people look at you sideways and they say, well, because he said so. And you go, okay, but really, if he understood the work we're doing, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. And so all of a sudden, you become not just a director of work, you become basically a focus of let's have this conversation. I really need to know why it has to be this way. And that's where you really learn to move from being just a manager of work to being a leader of work, creating these conversations where the innovation occurs. And all companies and all managers want innovation because it's the breakaway thing that makes revenue where other companies can't. But at the same time, it takes time to build that culture. It really does. You have to listen to other people instead of telling people what to do, and that takes time. That's a great question, by the way.
So, in line with that, how do we assess the risks that we find? How do we assess how big it is or how small it is? What are big ideas behind assessing risks in a large projects?
I had a friend from Egypt in Cairo that actually he was part of my consulting organization, a project manager, and he was brilliant. Whenever he started a project kickoff, he said, "We need to talk the same language." And he said, no, I'm not talking about English. I'm saying when I say orange, am I talking about the color, the flavor, the smell, everything? And unless we agree totally on what orange means, we're not going to be talking the same language. And so he said, when we talk about risk, here's how we're going to talk about impact. Okay, let's keep it simple with an impact discussion. We're going to go 1, 3, 5. We're going to go green, yellow, red. And green is going to be, if I wasn't looking for it, I wouldn't notice that risk occurring. Yellow means we need to slow down work. Red means we need to stop work in order to respond to that risk. Let's keep it simple. And if we need to add complexity to it, we will. But right now, let's keep it that way. So it's a clear articulation of impact. So everybody is saying the same thing. And you can also take that over to probability as well. And you start educating your team and say, okay, everything that we look at from here on out, number one, it's a coin flip. And let's agree that a coin flip is 50% heads and 50% tails, unless you have more information and you know something I don't. By saying that as a project manager, you're saying I'm exposing my subject experts. And it's your subject experts that are going to help you refine your risk. Now, where does risk come from? And risk identification. Where do I look for risk? It's yes. It's everything, right? Categories of risk help you understand. Now, you take your probability times your impact, and that gives you the prioritization of all your risks. And you need to prioritize because that's where you find your big risk boulders. At the same time, you're actually looking at categories, because if you have one category that has 90% of the risks, where are you going to spend your time, right? That's your prioritization. So you're using your probability and your impact plus your understanding of categories. Now, it gets even more complicated than that. But if you do that, that's about 68 to 84% of your risk work. But identifying and communicating is a big thing. One of the things that you learn when you formally study risk and risk management is that part of the value of doing this risk stuff is just having people see you're talking about it, and they understand that this is a big part of it. That's the key around risk and risk management. We're doing it. Yeah, it's exploration. And the other thing is, you are a source of risk. When you study statistics, there's this variable called epsilon, and epsilon is the amount of error that exists in the analysis. And if I were to ever get a tattoo, it would say right here, assume epsilon is always greater than zero, right? I am going to create errors, and I have to be aware of that. There's a real bias in just understanding that, I'm a facilitator. I don't add errors. Yes, you do. Yes. Project management, if you do it right, keeps you very, very humble.
So, as you suggested, like communication is the key for assessing the risk. So, communication can be like both sides, right? The people whom you report, the people who are the real clients, as well as the people who are your teammates. So, how should I ensure that my communication reaches to my teammates?
You're talking about acknowledgement, right?
Yes.
Um, so, Manish and Sumit,
Tim,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Tim, yeah, sorry to interrupt. And since Sumit asked this questions, there's another question that just came to my mind. We just a while back we discussed about risk analysis and risk assessment uh, details, right? So, say for example, I am a project manager and I did an analysis and I have noted the risk and I know the risk. Now, I'm trying to link this with Sumit's second question, communication. Now, that assessment results or assessment report, I need to communicate to my stakeholders. Now, would you also, when you answer Sumit's second question, would you also try to add in some thoughts on how to communicate these risk assessment? And trust me, risk assessment. Uh, I understand I have a team, so when I do a risk assessment, not all the time risk assessment goes positive. I mean, most of the time it's negative. So passing on an information, communicating a negative report, what are the do's and don'ts, and how a project manager should actually pass it on to the stakeholders. And these stakeholders, again, it's not only the internal but also the external, the clients whom we have to report, isn't it?
This is a really hard question. Pretend you're back 4,000 years and you're a soldier in an army. Do you want the general to say, oh, we're having a party and everything's great? Or do you want a general to say, we have a 60% chance of getting through this, but if we work together and we work hard, and if we do this, we have a chance of coming out on the other side, and we come out on the other side better than we were today? Which general would you follow into a battle? The problem is, companies, organizations, and entire cultures prefer to hear only good news. And when you start telling the truth, they say, but that person isn't telling the truth. There's something called integrity, and it comes from a Latin word. We know it like integration, an integer. Integrity means being of a whole piece, right? Being one single thing, unification, consolidation, coordination. Well, integrity means I say one thing. I say one thing to the janitor. I say one thing to the vice president. And the expectation is you're not going to like everything I say, but every time you talk to me, you're going to get the straight story. And I'm going to tell you 60%, and you're going to experience 60 to 70%. That means that you're going to be able to predict what I'm going to be talking about. A lot of times it's not going to be comfortable, but it's going to be there. And if I do this enough time, number one, your confidence grows in me. Number two, you learn to trust me. Now, leaders do not don't have followers because the followers like them. Leaders have followers because followers trust them. The second part of this, how do I get people to trust me? It doesn't work that way. It's like, how do I get a plant to grow? It doesn't work that way, right? You clean out the weeds, you clean out the rocks, and you give the water, and you let the plant do its thing. Well, trust is what groups do when you get rid of rocks and weeds out of the way, and you feed them and you give it nutrition, and it takes time. Trust happens because of the nature of people as groups. And here's the bad thing. You have to learn to trust yourself. And people, by observing you trusting yourself, learn to trust you. So what you have to do is have a relationship with yourself and prove to yourself first that when I say 60%, I really mean 60%, which means you have internal integrity and you create this aura around you and you have confidence around you. And this takes 2 or 3 years. If you're just a manager and nobody's taught you how to be a manager, it takes about 2 to 3 years, somewhere between 2 and 7 years, actually. People learn this naturally, okay? But you can actually, if you understand the mechanics of it, make it happen quicker. You can't force it. It's like forcing a plant to grow. But yeah, it's something that just grows. That's the key.
So communication is is very much, or I would say, all dependent on the trust that you have been able to build with your stakeholders, isn't it? Or
Yeah,
is there any other factor or is there any other factor that matters in?
a
I'll tell
lot.
you a very interesting. I'll tell you a very interesting situation, Tim. Okay, one of my project managers uh, comes to me with a negative report. I'm telling you because I asked that question. So one of the project manager comes to me with a negative report. Now I'm the boss here, and I already have certain things in my perspective, my knowledge. Uh, I don't hear him. You understand what I'm saying? I don't hear him because he is sending me negative reports. And then I try to push him that, hey, you know what, why you are missing on the deadlines, why the cost is high, why you're not actually working within the budgets, right? Now, I'm trying to understand, and this is for the project managers. What a project manager should do, he should actually, I'm trying to understand a step-on-step process, how a project manager should convince or take his boss into confidence to ensure the project delivery meets its deadlines and the budget.
So you're dealing with two problems, okay? And this is the unhappy circumstance of being a manager. You're working at two levels. One level is solving the issue, and the other level is conflict. The issue is what's getting in the way of the problem, and the conflict is getting in the way of the resolution of the issue. So if you can table the conflict and take the energy of the moment to focus on the resolution of the issue, oftentimes the conflict itself goes away. In the meantime, if you do this enough, let's set aside the conflict. Here's the problem. And let's focus on really solving the problem first. Then we can look at the emotional attachment and emotional energy. And the whole key is conflict works like this. Right? Conflict is I'm right and you're wrong, and everybody is that way. And the problem is people are neither right nor wrong. And the trick is, how do I actually create this environment? How can I do this enough times so people around me say, okay, Tim doesn't want this, Tim wants this, so we can solve the problem. And that it's not something you can take people into a conference room and do on a whiteboard. It's something that you have to do in the heat of the moment. It's those small teachable moments. And we teach. A project manager does not just teach their team. They teach the janitor. They teach the admin. They teach the sales reps. They teach the vice presidents. And sometimes they even teach the CEO. Now, you have to be humble when you're a project manager and you're teaching a CEO. Teaching up is really dicey until you realize that they're human beings just like you. And then you realize that there is a language and a culture that the executives have. And the more you understand that, the more you understand how their mind works. You can start having these conversations before you're in the heat of the moment. But fundamentally, it's actually separating the emotional attachment to the issue and then solving the issue, and doing that to where you're working as a group, really solving problems instead of just dealing with the conflict itself. Again, you can take classes in this, you can read books about it, but it's actually doing it and making mistakes time after time after time is where you learn how to do this well.
That's perfect. I mean, your example of this and goes this, it makes sense. You have to actually go parallel. I 110% agree with.
And we should explore this sometimes. We should actually talk more about conflict and conflict management, because there's multiple strategies, and it's almost magical. It's almost too simplistic when you start seeing how groups work, that you can actually just do a little bit of a tipping point at certain points, and all of a sudden an entire group can turn. For instance, you have a bunch of people in a room, and half of them are sitting on a conference table on one side and half of them are on the other, and they're staring each other down. It's funny, because what you can do, and this is a really cool trick, is if you can get them to agree on anything, they start thinking as a group. It doesn't matter. What type of pizza should we order? What type of ice cream? Where do you like to go on vacation? Because if you can get them to agree on one concept, even if it's not work, they're starting to think as a group. And that is your pivot point to actually go from the conflict into the issues. There's about 4 or 5 other strategies that you can use. And if you understand the strategies, you can apply them very, very, very easily.
Perfect. Thanks, Sumit. Sorry, I took your time.
One thing that I have usually observed is, if you keep team members involved, like the questions that you pose, instead of like you deciding the timeline, and if you keep them involved and then they give you the timeline, how much time is going to take, the chances of them adhering to that, or chances of them completing in that timeline becomes more. And they also feel involved, and they feel more inclined towards obtaining that goal, reaching that goal as well. So it can be as simple as just asking their time or asking their inputs on to start with.
And that's the big thing about consensus. If you can get people to agree, if you can get people to agree, or even vote, if you can get people to vote, and it's not saying you voted, shame on you because you're not that way. It gives you an opportunity to explore and expose things like requirements changing, like risk changing, like other things. And you start, instead of start saying, okay, you said this, you said that. No, we can't have that. And you don't do that. What you don't say no. It's no is an easy thing to say. You do it much more strategically, and you do it in a much more crafty manner. You ask questions. There used to be a show in the 1960s here in the United States called Columbo, and he was a really shabby detective. and he always asked questions. He never made statements. And he treated himself and he exposed himself as stupid. And everybody thought he was stupid until the last 5 minutes of the show, where everything falls together and you realize he was actually staging these conversations. And that's what a project manager does. Say, okay, I'm not smart here. Can you actually help me here? Why are you? And that's the key. Like you said, you're getting them involved in this. Please explain why. I need to understand why so we can make this change if we need it. And they're participating in it. And if they're participating in it, it's part of them. And again, we're talking about motivation.
So there is a psychologist who have with the name Ben Franklin, and I think you would have heard even that as well, the Ben Franklin effect. If suppose if you ask somebody a favor, the chances of them liking you and doing another favor becomes higher, and this also plays to your advantage when you are in a team setting and you want inputs from the team members.
And it's not just your team members. I did this with vice presidents in a major corporation. And what I would do is I'd find the vice presidents who had initiatives that were in line with my project. And I'd say to them, I'd say 5 minutes. Okay, can I have 5 minutes of your time? And he said, right. Yeah. And I said, okay, I heard your speech and I saw your emails. And this is really interesting. And I like the way you positioned this idea. I cannot get this right in my slide. Could you just look over this one slide? You know what I'm doing? I'm assigning this vice president work. And by assigning them work, they're actually participating in this. And part of them is now there. And from now on, the vice president's going to see that project and it's going to be their project. And all of a sudden, I have a proponent at the executive level to support my project. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Again, these tricks emerge after you've been doing this for 5 or 10 years.
Wonderful. All right. So, Sumit, we'll now bring in Manish. Manish has been waiting for long. I see. Yeah. So, Manish, now, if you have any questions from your day-on-day project management processes or challenges, you can ask Tim.
Yeah. Hi, Tim. Thanks for the insights. Like we discussed about risk management and also on the timelines, right? So one of the major issues that I have faced when managing a project is how do we estimate the project based on time and cost? How do we ensure that we know the timelines are correct and even the cost is correct? Okay?
There are tried and true methods. But you have to realize that it's a delicate balance. Early in the project, you have very little information, but you have a lot of communication. And so basically you're saying, okay, based on the information today, I know it's bigger than a bread box and smaller than a bus, right? And so you're going to get a rough order of magnitude estimation. And that's all right for certain decisions. But then what you do is as you get more commitment and more engagement, the work and the focus of the work and the success of the project becomes more important. And that's where you can say, okay, guys, you really want this to be tight? I need your help. Again, I'm not smart. I know how to do this. I know the mechanics of the formulas and the estimation and bringing risk in, but you guys need to give me the information. And here's the information I need. Tell me 3 things. Give me an estimate for money and cost where everything goes wrong. Okay? Tell me the worst possible outcome. It's a pessimistic. Tell me a perfect estimate, if the work was to be done perfect, it's called optimistic, right? And now all of a sudden, you have two different spans, and you know that your estimate is going to come in there somewhere in between those two extremes. They're not realistic, but it's going to be somewhere. And then you ask for some middle ground. It's called a most likely. And that gives you 3 data points. Once you have your 3 data points, you can start bringing in something called the normal distribution, and you can start looking at means and averages and standard deviations, and you can start speaking like a
Yeah, I mean the weighted average
right.
of the estimate.
Exactly. That's the best way. And again, if you do this time after time after time, people start understanding that, hey, if I can give Tim better data, he can give me a better estimate. And the more you can actually start educating your team, not just on the weighted average, but standard deviation, which is your accuracy, and variance, which is your precision, and you can actually start talking in these numbers, all of a sudden executives start listening to you. And they say, boy, I'm going to make sure my team gives Tim the information he needs because he's talking serious here. Because all of a sudden I'm starting to talk like what the executive learned in business school.
Yeah. So Tim, we agree on the timelines, suppose, right? Now, if I want to deliver a project on a tight budget, how do I ensure a smooth delivery of the project? So many of my clients, they come back saying, you know what, the timeline looks good, but then I don't have a budget, right?
So there's 3 things that a sponsor will always tell me, okay? I need it now, I need it cheap, and I need it fancy.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right? And my mentor in consulting said, you always say thank you because they gave you information. And then you say, okay, let's have a realistic conversation. You get to select 2, because once you select 2, the other is decided for you. You and I have no choice. It's like arguing against physics. We can't do it. And all of a sudden, they realize that you're not just there to push the one horse that they're interested in. You're there actually to make sure all the horses work together. See, this is actually where communication is really good. We start off as project managers pushing the schedule horse or pushing the cost horse or pushing the risk horse, where a project manager is actually working at making sure all the horses work together. And once your executives understand that, then they can have a conversation with you and they say, okay, which horse is going slow? And how can I help you get that horse to work with the other horses? That's the secret. And again, it's nothing you can teach people. It's something that you can do time after time and create an environment. It's looking for windows of opportunity that I used to call teachable moments. It's creating that culture. If you start doing that with yourself and having this conversation with yourself, all of a sudden you are easily talking about this with your team and your janitors. And when you're talking to your janitors and team this way, you're more apt to talk to your executives this way. And all of a sudden, you're creating this wonderful thing called integrity, where you're not wearing multiple masks.
So, team, now one of the problems that I have faced personally is managing multiple projects at a time. I mean, the multitasking thing. Yeah, and what happens is some of the projects really slips from my hand. Yeah. So how do I ensure that this multiple projects are delivered on time?
There's something called program management. And anybody who runs multiple projects is a program manager. My number one program that I manage every day is how do I juggle all of the projects on my desk and get home with my family and have a good dinner with them. Okay? It's keeping an eye on how the projects not just move forward, but how they interact and how they impact each other. And you build your program key performance indicators, not just on the individual success of the projects, but how they impact each other. And then you can actually track that at the programmatic level. I would have often 9 to 13 projects running simultaneously. And overnight, 2 projects would just zoom up in velocity. And until I got a handle on where I could get that information on the velocity and the acceleration and deceleration of the velocity of projects, that's where I learned how to do good program management. What's the data that feeds me so I can actually manage them not just as individual success points, but as a group success point. Yeah, you get to think as a program manager, not just project manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add in, as we earlier discussed, the communication channel has to be quite transparent and trustworthy, right? Uh, so, Manish, yeah, you have to keep your communication channel very, very transparent. And I'm not sure, but if there's any tool which can actually give you a dashboard kind of view, right?
Exactly.
Where you can keep a tip. I mean, do that. Right, Tim? If you have 10 projects running parallelly, you need to have the nitty-gritty of all those projects right in front of your eyes. If some tool can actually give you that capability, you should have it, I believe.
There's one word that actually is the best tool. It's called relationships. I'm serious.
Yes.
Number one, the only way you know people really understand the information you give them is acknowledgement. It's just like TCP/IP on the internet. There's that ACK, that is returned as part of
Acknowledgement. Yeah.
that. Exactly. And you are responsible for getting that acknowledgement from the people. So somehow how you interact with people creates, again, over and over and over again, please forgive me, I'm going to ask this question a couple times. It's not that you're not doing anything, it's just that I don't understand, right? And it's creating that so that they're comfortable with you going over the same thing over and over and over again. The other part that is really scary is that when you have teams of 25 to 75, all of a sudden you realize there's information out there that I need that I'm not getting. It's not that people are withholding information. It's not deviance. It's just the nature of communication. It's the sharing of information 2 ways. Sometimes you're not part of that discussion. And so you have to figure out a way of how do I actually find those communication channels and how can I actually utilize that. My former business partner was a master sergeant at the battalion level. And what he would do is he'd have a project team over on one side of the country and a project team over at the other side. And he would actually use words and phrases that were different to one team to the other. So he could watch how those words and phrases were populating over months and weeks of work. So he could actually map who was talking to whom. And it takes time to do this, but if it's critical and if you have long-term projects, that type of investment is incredibly valuable.
Yes, Dave. So as we speak about relationships and communication, how do I say no to a client?
You don't say no. You say not today. And
Okay.
that's one way. okay, and the other way is, okay, basically what Sumit was saying, get them to participate in the problem solving. And you say, okay, let's see what this does. Okay, I need to understand why you need it first. And number two, let's figure out, because I see this pushing back, or if we do this, it's going to break this. And how do we fit this together? And a lot of times, the stakeholder or the sponsor who says you have to have it this way, they say it's your problem. And that's where your team comes in. And if you get your team participating in the problem solving, then you can say to the person you want to say no to, you can say, okay, this is this is a group of us. This is not just my opinion, but this is a group of us saying this is what we have right now. This is what you want. This is the gap we need to fill. Now, we can fill it this way, or this way, or this way. Do you want to fill it with a hamburger, a chicken dinner, or a steak? What's your choice? And now all of a sudden we're getting into scope, schedule, and cost, and we're getting into, the different type of constraints. You push it. It's like a ball full of water. You push one side of the ball, the water's going to poke out the other side. And it's just having a conversation over and over and over again until the executives start seeing the problem you're having. You don't force them to see it. You basically get them into the problem solving so that they feel the pain that you do. And then all of a sudden, executives are doing their work. The executives are there to move boulders and weeds so that the good work can happen. It's your job to move the boulders and weeds for your team. And then what you can do is allow the team to do their great work.
Yeah, thanks to it.
So I had a question regarding one thing is like, how do we say no to a client? The other aspect is, how do I get, if my team is saying no to me, how do I identify the best team members, or how do I believe like everyone is best at their own. How do I get the best out of them, get the work done?
Adding to that, team, even I have a problem where my teammates doesn't take me seriously. Right? How do we address that as well? Yeah.
So this is the way humans are. We test our culture and environment. First of all, you don't take it personally. This is just humans. If somebody says this is the boundary, if we all have young children, and if you say don't go here, they're going to put a toe over there, right? This is human behavior. It's the same thing with teams. We never grow out of it. And so it's your job to smile and pat them on the head and realize, they're just doing what humans do. And you say, okay, that's great. There's some strategies that you can do that are very tactical. Number one, you can create an experience so that they don't break anything, but they understand the impact of not following directions. Basically, if we get things done here, I'll buy us a pizza. Whoops, we don't get a pizza today. Or you can actually get them enlisted. And this comes back to Sumit's comment. The more I can actually convey why we're doing the work, why this is important. It's like a guy went in his 20s and 30s. He built a dam in a valley that actually he just puts nuts on screws, right? And he puts nuts on screws for the dam, and that's all he does. But then when he's 80 years old, he takes his grandchild to the dam, and he says, he doesn't say, I put nuts on screws. What does he say? I helped build a dam that made this valley rich, and we were able to prosper. Okay, which type of a worker is going to actually be doing greater work? And that's what a leader does. They paint the vision and they use the vision. And if you can actually, and this is really the source of motivation, if you can actually figure out how to connect a person's fulfillment of their personal needs to the work, you can actually get them to do the work because they're fulfilling their own needs. For instance, they need a paycheck. Great, let's get you work. Or they need to be around people. Like right now, we're sequestered, and a lot of people have a need to interact. So a great strategy right now would be having more meetings, even if it's meetings over the internet. What you're doing is creating an opportunity for people to connect what they need, even though it's just getting the work done. It's fulfilling personal needs. And if you can actually understand humans' personal needs, you can do that. And they're going to do the work naturally. It takes time, and it's harder than just ordering people around. But all of a sudden, you're getting people to want to get the work done. And that's and all of a sudden, over doing this months and years, people want to work for you because you're helping them figure out their life's problems. And all of a sudden, you are the great problem solver. You're not the person who's pushing them at work every day. Yeah.
Tim, one more questions that I'm having here is I'm sure this question um, uh, is a question with most of the project managers out there. Is when you actually about to choose your team, and then this directly relates to Sumit's questions coming in. When you have to choose your team, what are the things that you should actually look for in your teammates?
Here's the thing. Is it easier to train people in Excel and databases and Microsoft Word and pushing buttons, or is it easier to teach people how to play well together?
There's a second one.
Really? Is it easier to teach people how to play well together or Excel?
I think the second one is tougher.
Teaching people how to play well together?
Yes, it's
It
like
is.
is the
I mean, the coordination, getting them coordinated is definitely a tough job.
Let's go into sports. Let's go into sports. Every sports team wants a superstar, right? They want a superstar on that team. But the problem is, all of their strategies in their playbook is based on that one superstar. And what if that superstar's sick? What if you were able to create a team that was not made of superstars, but were made of people who play well together? Think about football, right?
Yes.
And all of a sudden, you're not afraid of losing your superstar. You have a bunch of team players. See, and this is where it gets really interesting. And all of a sudden, I don't want the best people. Oh, you take them. I can actually, if I can figure out how to do it, I can actually take anybody and get them to work together. And if they can get a sense of all I have is my little piece here, I'm playing my position, I'm actually in the game with where the ball is, but at the same point, I'm not running all over the field. And again, this is what's hard. It's easy to teach skills. It really is. What the trick is to get people on your team to play position. And there's a time where the team says, all of a sudden, hey, I don't have to tell that person that my report needs to be on my desk anymore. It's just there magically. And it happens over and over again. Or I don't have to tell that person to keep their coffee cup away from my paperwork. They do it naturally over and over again, and it builds confidence, and that's where trust comes from. And all of a sudden people are able to focus on their work instead of worrying about getting other people's work done. So it and all of these minor things that are in the back of my mind as a worker fall aside, and I can start working. Yeah, it's a big transition from going from a manager who has to track and measure and make sure people are doing the right things to actually saying, I'm actually supporting people who are doing the work. And that's what a project manager does. And actually, being a project manager is even more difficult because we're responsible for both sides. We're responsible for the metrics, and we have to hold people accountable. That's management. But we're also responsible for the culture and the growth of the organization and the group of the team within our project, and that's being a leader. And we have to be good and balance both of those. It's really trickier than it is in operations.
In the software world, we keep hearing about this 10x developer syndrome. Like, would you rather have like couple of 10x developers, or would you have like 4 engineers who play well with each other?
And let's expand. Yeah, and let's expand this. Would you rather have somebody who's an expert today in a language, or would you rather have somebody who's comfortable walking into an environment and telling you and telling themselves, I may not be the best one here, but if your language changes tomorrow, if your tools change tomorrow, I'll be up to the task to be able to change with that. Now, which type of a team member do you want to choose? Now, I want a bunch of people on my team who roll with the punches and are comfortable with working under chaos and ambiguity with me. I'd rather have them, not a bunch of yes people. I don't want yes people. I like people who push back, but at the same time, I also want people who say, I'm I'm good at R, I'm good at C++, I'm good at C#, but that's not what I'm good at. I'm really good at, if something comes down the road and we need to make a change, I'll sit down with you and we'll figure out how we'll do it together. Yeah, I don't want to take up any more time, but there's a great set of articles on coaches in California in the early to mid 2000s who coached kids soccer teams, and they started playing this way, and all of a sudden they weren't playing to win. They were playing to just play well together, and they wouldn't have great wins, but they would have so many more consecutive wins that were just barely wins, that all of a sudden over time it was observed that they were playing a totally different game than the other kids were.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? I have a couple of questions on the chat here. One question says on the PMP. Tim, it's coming back on the PMP stuff. Now, PMP is changing next year. Is it the right time to take the training and examination this year, or should I wait for the time when it changes?
Yes, both of them. Take it when you're ready and you're ready to invest in it. Okay, it is an investment and a commitment. But that being said, I would reverse engineer. The first change next year is January the 2nd. Okay, that's when the exam really changes. We can talk about what those changes are. But what I would do is talk to an expert. And I'd say, okay, it takes about 32 to 35 hours for me to get my formal project management training I need for my application for the exam. And then it takes another 4 to 8 to 12 weeks of daily preparation. And so working backwards from that, you're looking at about 2 to 3 months. So you have probably a couple months before you have to be serious about taking the exam before that January 2nd. Now, January 2nd isn't the big change. A lot of the changes are not going to be in the material on January 2nd. It's going to be the way the questions are organized. Instead of the questions are all random, the exam's random. But instead of being randomly selected based on initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing, they're going to be organized by people skills, your understanding of business, your understanding of project management from a scope, schedule, cost, risk, and quality standpoint. And then there's another pivot point. Half of the questions are going to be on agile project management, and half the questions are going to be on plan driven, what we call predictive project management. Right now, they're mostly predictive, and there are a few agile questions on the exam, but it's agile as agile impacts the way we manage project. It's not looking at Scrum and Sprint so much. It's looking at, you have an agile project, what happens to your budget? We have to understand how agile impacts risk, how it impacts quality, and other things. And that's pretty well laid out in the current PMBOK. It just means that, those 35 hours and the 2 or 3 months of going through practice questions daily, you need to make sure that the material you're working on, it looks at both the agile and the predictive project management stuff.
Is there any news, Tim, on what changes coming on the way?
Oh, yeah. So that's first of all, okay? Second of all, we have the change in the project management body of knowledge, and they released the initial rough draft early in the year, and there were comments inside of PMI, and a lot of us can speak to that, and they have the vision of what the 7th edition PMBOK was going to be. And they've sequestered themselves, and they're working on that. And we can talk about that. I can talk really good about the changes to the exam, because there's a lot of material out there. If you put all the material out and see the patterns, you can basically see what they're doing strategically as well as tactically with the exam change. And the PMBOK is due to come out, the 7th edition is due to come out mid-year next year, I think. I may be wrong. Some people, even the audience, may know better than me, but that's going to be a real showstopper. Based on the early comments and the other changes inside Project Management Institute, there's a really a lot of interest around that. Now, there are other things that are changing at the same time. A big part of this is the application itself. PMI said about 2 or 3 weeks ago on today, June 15th, that they're going to have a change to the application that streamlines it. And they haven't announced publicly what that means. And so we're going to see here over the next week or two what streamlining the application for the PMP exam means. Yeah, they have this information all the time. LinkedIn, there's a lot of groups that talk about this and share their knowledge. So there's a lot of ways you can get connected, or you can just stay in touch with us, because I try to stay connected to the various streams of information that are gathering this as well.
Anyway, we come live every Monday, 7:30 India time and 10 a.m. Eastern time. So we'll anyway keep updating the people around if there's any new changes or any other news which comes around. Right. Before I end this session. Question to you, Manish and Sumit. How you guys are liking this work from home stuff?
Well,
I mean, me
we have
and
got
Tim has been,
addicted to this.
yeah.
Well, I mean,
I mean, I'm
the major problem I see from working from home has been the coordination. A lot of my time goes into getting the team coordinated on right on Teams or probably on Slack, right? Even for the smallest change or smallest query that my people has, I have to get on a call, right? So that takes a lot of my time. But yeah, we got adjusted to this now. Yeah.
So I want to say something to that. You have something in common with the greatest emperor of Rome. Marcus Aurelius, he he wrote a book called Meditations. Okay, and he was one of the top 5 emperors of Rome, and he lived about 1800 years ago. We have Meditations was his personal journal, and the first entry in his journal says, "Remember, Marcus, these people don't know what you have. They don't have your experience. Don't be hard on them. Be patient. They're human beings. They make mistakes." So remember, when you're saying this to yourself, you're just echoing what some of the greatest leaders in history actually had to remind themselves as well. You're solving the same problems that these guys solved on a daily basis. It's the communication, it's the patience, it's creating that environment so it makes it easy to actually communicate easily, and they want to share information. Is it a pleasant experience to have these conversations, even having the hard conversations? Can they get through it and they're not risking their jobs? Those are the small things you can do, especially when you're working remotely. Are there emotional rewards through getting together and sharing information? That's what makes a good team, and we all know what a quote unquote good team experience is. It's just something that now, as a project manager, you get to create the environment.
Pretty true. Yeah.
and Sumit, what is your view? What changes you
So
see?
yeah, so some of the benefits are obviously like you get to spend more time with family. You get to you avoid the main hassles like of city like Bangalore, where travel is the most chaotic part of our day-to-day life. So you save a ton of chaos, and you are more productive. But yeah, the things like how do we get together, how do we understand, how do we build those trust, those happens only uh, tea break sessions when we have those things. Those will obviously help in building more trust, and there are like ideas that can flow when you just come out of a meeting and you discuss about a tangential topic maybe to related to that ideas, those kind of things I miss. There are like much of many things happen on like when we are faced to each other, when we are together, many ideas come out. Those ideas I see completely lacking now.
There's one other thing I want to add to this. We're telling our teams to actually figure out problems together and work together. And as project managers, we're in isolation and we're working in stovepipes, and we think we're supposed to solve all our problems by ourselves. And this is something that we're notoriously bad at. And we need to actually treat ourselves as our team members and remind ourselves that we need our own support network. We need our own team that we can reach out to. We don't complain to our team, we complain to our peers. We bring our problems to our peers and we solve them as a group. And again, this is something that you just have to get used to. Create a culture of a network of people that you can actually call. I have a mentor back from 2000 that I talk to about 2 or 3 times a month. I have another mentor that I've been working with for 15 years that we interact at least 2 or 3 times a year. And it's that just having that network sometimes gives you the confidence. Building those relationships is what will make you strong.
Building the relationship and creating a trust within the colleagues and your stakeholders. Yeah, you are right. 110%. Perfect. Guys, if there's any other questions to our viewers or to Sumit and Manish and other project managers who are listening us, please feel free to drop in your queries even after this session ends. You can still use the comment box to put in your queries or shoot an email to our email ID, which is hello@Ijona Academy. And we'll take those questions. And in our next session, which is again on Monday, same time, we'll cover those questions within our discussion. Isn't it, Tim?
This is excellent. I really appreciate you guys being here. You're doing the hard work. Bless you. And we'll keep it going. And we're always here. I really promote this type of communication, and whether it's done in front of an audience or whether it's done at the water cooler, let's just keep these channels open one way or the other. This is rich. It's a great experience for me, but I know when I was a project manager active with the critical projects you guys are doing, it was a treat to actually be talking to people who've been doing this for 20 to 25 years.
Right, right, perfect. So with this, thank you so much, Tim, once again for all your time and patience to listen the queries and answering and helping us in solving those stuffs. I really appreciate your time. And then Manish, yeah, and Manish and Sumit, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us and bringing your questions, your real life issues during the project management that you guys face. So thank you for bringing it up.
Thanks so much.
And I look forward to have a similar session again with you people in the coming days, and we'll collaborate.
Thanks for inviting.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you guys for being so open.
Thanks, Tim. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Have a nice
Thank
day.
you. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.
And Kumar, thanks for pulling this together. This is such a treat, and looking forward to more of these conversations.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Tim. Thank you so much, Sumit. Thank you.
you.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Smith.
Good days. Yeah, good day, guys. Talk to you soon.